used for centuries as the dumping ground for the diseased, dying, and deceased. Yeah, it's not shocking that this island has the nickname Island of Ghosts. Hi loves, it's Aura. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to a brand new video. In this episode of A Haunted History, we will be heading to Italy to explore the most haunted place in the country and some say in the world, Poveglia Island. As with most of my A Haunted History videos, we will discuss themes that can be upsetting to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Poveglia has a long history which is steeped in death and disease. If you have seen some of my other A Haunted History videos, you will know that disease and war are the two main contributing factors to make for a perfect storm for hauntings, and the island has both. The island is a small one and sits in the Venetian lagoon between Venice and Lido in northern Italy. There is a small canal that divides the island into two separate parts. The burning grounds in the northern part, and a majority of the buildings and plague field in the southern part. Poveglia was probably inhabited as early as 2000 BC, because this is when historical records show the arrival of a group of Proto-Italians called the Eugani to the region. Poveglia itself is first mentioned in records in 421, when Romans from the declining Roman Empire fled to the island to escape the invasions by Alaric the Goth and Attila the Hun. The people there were left alone by the rest of the country due to it being easily defendable and such a small island that it just wasn't desirable. For centuries, these people lived in peace and avoided the laws and taxes of the mainland. In the 9th century, the population on Poveglia began to grow because the Doge of Venice was killed and 200 of his slaves escaped to the island. The bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, arrived in Venice in 1348 and 22 other times in the 2 centuries after. Giovanni Boccaccio, a 14th century Italian, described the state of the plague in Italy as this: "The condition of the people was pitiable to behold. They sickened by the thousands daily, and died unattended and without help. Many died in the open street, others dying in their houses, made it known by the stench of their rotting bodies. Consecrated churchyards did not suffice for the burial of the vast multitude of bodies, which were heaped by the hundreds in vast trenches, like goods in a ship's hold, and covered with a little earth." Venice, at that time, was Europe's dominant trading port and was highly susceptible to disease. To combat this, Venetian officials took advantage of Poveglia, and it became a quarantine colony called a lazaretto. In my video about Mary King's Close, we talk briefly about the plague and how every 1 in 3 Europeans were killed due to the disease, and Venice was no different. The plague wiped out half of the population of Venice, about 50,000 people. Venice, fearing the unchecked spread of the plague, exiled many symptomatic citizens, even those with the mildest symptoms, to the island for a minimum of 40 days, where they either died or rarely recovered. The word quarantine itself comes from the Italian quaranta, meaning 40. In the center of the island, giant pyres were created for the dead on Poveglia, as well as the tens of thousands dead on the mainland. They dug massive pits into the earth, which they would throw bodies into, and then, when full, they'd light them on fire. It looked like hell. The sick lay 3 or 4 in a bed, wrote 16th century chronicler Rocco Benedetti. He goes on to say, "Workers collected the dead and threw them in the graves all day without a break. Often the dying ones and the ones too sick to move or talk were often taken for dead and thrown on the piled corpses. This meant that many of those people were still alive when they were tossed in with the dead and potentially even burned alive. These pyres would be lit again when the Black Death swept through the country again in 1630. Poveglia, only 17 acres, housed 100,000 to 160,000 people over the centuries, most of them dying on that island. There were so many bodies burned on the island that the soil is said to make up 50 to 60% human ash and sinks when you walk on it. Essentially, the entire island is a mass grave. In 1379, Venice was attacked by the Genoan fleet during the Chioggia War, and the people living on Poveglia were moved to Giudecca, another island in the lagoon. They built an octagonal fort, one of 5, and turned Poveglia into a military outpost to strictly control the lagoon. After this, the island remained uninhabited for several centuries. Venice's ruler in 1485, Giovanni Mocenigo, died from another outbreak of the plague, which spurred the city to create several more plague colonies on isolated islands. Anthropologist Luisa Gambaro said, when plague struck the town, everybody sick or showing any suspect symptoms were restricted on the island until they recovered or died. Venice decided in 1777 to bulk up its response to disease prevention, and the Magistrate of Health turned Poveglia into its primary plague checkpoint. Any ship sailing into Venice first had to stop at Poveglia, and if any soldier or sailor showed signs of the plague, they were quarantined on the island. During the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon Bonaparte took control of the region. He closed the lazaretto and used Poveglia for military storage. Bonaparte also destroyed the church on the island, the Church of San Vitale, and he converted the old bell tower into a lighthouse. His military campaign relied on the island's ghostly legends to protect the stores of gunpowder and weapons, but this secret was leaked, which led to small battles on the island and even more death. Poveglia was used as an asylum in the 1800s and early 1900s, where the area's mentally ill were sent. Bear in mind that you could be sent to an asylum for any manner of reasons, including but not limited to epilepsy, female disease, and jealousy. The building used as the asylum was shoddily constructed, and, like many asylums at the time, was used as a place of exile rather than rehabilitation. It is rumored that in the 1930s, the doctor of Poveglia was an extreme sadist and performed all manner of experiments on the patients, including primitive lobotomies without anesthesia or thought to sanitation. Some of the tools he used can still be seen in the rooms of the hospital to this day, including hammers, chisels, and drills. It is even thought that he would torture the patients simply for his pleasure and saved the most heinous torture for special patients, which he took to the bell tower where their screams echoed out across the island. It should be noted, though, that past psychological practices like lobotomies, not torture for pleasure, were often practiced in such a way. Not that it wasn't horrendous and incredibly inhumane, but this wasn't outside of the norm. Legend has it that this doctor went mad and threw himself off of the bell tower, killing him instantly. Others say that he was haunted by the tortured souls of the island, and yet others say that a patient, or even more sinister, a paranormal entity, pushed him over. Supposedly, one nurse witnessed his fall and claimed that he initially survived, but a ghostly mist overcame his body and choked him to death. Another legend is that the doctor was seized by lobotomized patients and walled up inside of the tower. Regardless of the story, The locals believe his spirit is trapped within the tower to this day, and if you listen closely, you can hear the echoes of a bell tolling from the lonely island, even though the bell was removed during Napoleon's time. Later, Poveglia was used as a nursing home and long-term care facility until it closed in 1968. It should be noted that in some local history books, instead of a nursing home, the buildings are referred to a place to house aged indigents. After this, Poveglia was briefly used for agriculture before being completely abandoned. Now, wild grapevines grow wildly there, flourishing in areas where the mass graves and pyres were thought to once be located. In 2014, the Italian state auctioned the island for a 99-year lease. It was to remain state property and was intended to raise revenue in order to relieve the massive public debt, and had hopes that the buyer would repurpose the old hospital into a luxury hotel. Luigi Brugnaro was the highest bidder, offering 513,000 euros. He planned to invest 20 million euros into the restoration plan, but the lease did not proceed because his project was deemed to not meet all of the conditions. Some sources have said that the deal was annulled because the bid was too low. Brugnaro initially fought the annulment, but after he became mayor of Venice, he renounced any intentions to buy the land. The next year, in 2015, a private group called Poveglia per Tutti was trying to raise 25 to 30 million euros for a new plan for the island. They wanted to include a public park, marina, restaurant, hostel, and study center. Locals and tourists are prohibited from visiting the island, with many locals refusing to go near it. Recently, a construction crew attempted to restore the former hospital, but they suddenly stopped without explanation, which caused locals to speculate that dark forces had driven them away. Poveglia is illegal to travel to, and most locals even refuse to go or around the island. While it is illegal to take a boat over to Poveglia, some thrill seekers have snuck onto the island and have expressed an intense feeling of being watched as soon as they step foot on Poveglia. Others have reported getting scratched and pushed by invisible forces. Some entities have been known to push people violently into walls and chase them down corridors. Most visitors to the island report hearing eerie sounds, moans of pain, screams, and sounds of frantic fingers scrabbling at walls and doors. One group of thrill seekers reported entering the asylum and being struck with a heavy sense of dread, followed by a deep voice that said, "Leave immediately and do not return." They immediately complied. It should also be noted that patients at the asylum were also reported to have claimed to see the ghosts of plague victims, and said that they were kept up at night due to the screams of the tortured souls. Since the patients were already deemed insane, these reports were ultimately ignored. In the hospital and asylum, people have noted seeing shadows on the walls moving along with them, next to their own shadow. The handful of psychics that have been brought to the island have described the energy as malignant. The presence of angry spirits is so extreme that many of the psychics refuse to ever return to the island. Human bones continue to wash up on the shores of Poveglia, hundreds of years later. Most local fishermen even refuse to fish anywhere near the island in fear of picking up bones in their nets. There is even a local saying, "When an evil man dies, he wakes up in Poveglia." The government sometimes allows paranormal teams and TV crews to explore the island, but these teams have to pay locals handsomely to even convince them to go near the island. Both Ghost Adventures and Scariest Places on Earth have visited Poveglia. Poveglia has also been the topic of fiction and graphic novels. Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures called Poveglia nothing more than a cesspool of pure dread. When the team was on the island, they experienced disembodied voices, screams, EMF spikes, orbs, footsteps, energy drains, malfunctioning devices, and demonic possession. In the plague fields, they smelled something burning and heard the sound of disembodied screams and unexplained rustling through the bushes and grass. Their lights were knocked over and their names were heard. When Zach wore a plague doctor mask, they even heard the word doctor. So, what do you think? Is Poveglia haunted by the spirits of the hundreds of thousands of people who have died there? Or are the rumors of hauntings simply due to the fact that the island is still shrouded by mystery? Let me know down below. As always, thank you for watching this episode of A Haunted History. If you have any suggestions of what my next episode should cover, please let me know down below. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps me with the YouTube algorithm. If you want to be notified as soon as I post a new video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to turn notifications on. I post new videos every Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the occasional surprise video. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and stay spooky, friends, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, loves.